are my friends. Come along with me, see how the story ends.
I didn't know you know Spanish.
Back. Every now I know my numbers and colors. Welcome back to another episode of the Professional Hippies Podcast. Today we've got the God of Weather on to let us know how he determines what the weather of the day is going to be like, and then to let all of your local weathermen know whether you can go fishing or golfing that day. So,
God of Weather. Brandon, have you ever been introduced as the God of Weather?
I have not, no. This is the first time.
Hey, new tagline right there, brother. Free of charge. 2%. That's a modest kickback. That's
just
industry standard.
Kickback.
That's all we
Start
ask.
blowing up
Excellent.
on TikTok. Just let us know. And Brandon, is it? You told me last time your last name, Brandon Molyneaux. Am I close?
Nope. Close but no cigar. It's Molyneaux.
Molyneaux. Oh man,
That's a cool last name.
Yep.
I totally was off base
It
on
really
that one.
is.
That one's, as someone that has not the easiest last name in the world to pronounce. I mean, you roll up to the bank, you start spelling it. You know what the deal is, but that's a cool one, man. That one rolls off the tongue.
Yeah. So there's only 7 people that I've ever met in my entire life that have gotten it right on the first try, and none of them speak French, and like 3 or 4 of them had to look at it for a solid minute trying to figure out how to say it. So unfortunately, you guys did not make the cut tonight, but that's okay.
And that was my second try. Dang. Well, Brandon, thanks for coming on. We got to meet at Thancha's birthday party, and shout out Thancha again as well. Always introducing everybody to the best people. And you just encapsulated me with what you do. At first, you were talking about software, of course, and how you're able to relay weather and everything like that. I'm like, that's cool. But then you're like, also, the movie Twister, I'm that guy. And you just slowly glance over that. And I was like, let's go back to Dorothy here for a second and talk more about that. And so, but we'll get to that in a little bit. But I wanted to have you on just to kind of share a little bit about what you do, because it's not very often you run into young professionals that get to do what you do. And really, a lot of what people don't realize when you're checking your phone and what the weather or the temperature is going to be like that day, a lot of it's based off of what you're doing to relay that information. And so just wanted to have you on and really get to talk about that. Where are you again? You're in currently?
Currently in Tampa, Florida.
Oh, Tampa. But you just got back from Alabama, right?
Not too long. Actually, it was Denver. So we just came back from the American Meteorological Society conference, where tons and tons of meteorologists get together in one giant building and talk about, to everybody's surprise, weather. So that was a really cool conference. I got to meet up with my company. I got to meet up with a bunch of the people I went to college with. I got to network a little bit. So overall, it was just a great experience. So
that's awesome, man. And did y'all, when you're just talking about weather, I mean, are you just looking at what's currently going on? You're like, man, that event that happened in 1967 was crazy.
No, I mean, there is a little bit of history that does go on in that conference, but a lot of it is research. There's a huge part with communications as well. How can forecasters better communicate with the public so that way they can understand the forecast one step better. There's programming, which is what I do, modeling. There's space weather. There's what's called boundary layer meteorology, for instance, which is that very thin layer right above where we're at, basically. I mean, there's just so many topics there, and it's just so hard to pick which sessions you want to go to and check it out. So
I know which one. Space weather. What is that? Is that the immediate circumference around the Earth, or what's going on?
It is not. Colton, do you have any idea what space weather is?
I also heard that, and that might as well have been a buzzword for me. Not a clue. I mean, just observing the weather from space, or what role does this play in our newly adopted Space Force?
So it's actually the observations between the sun and the Earth, and what happens between there. So the sun will generate coronal mass ejections, for instance, and then that can send a bunch of particles to Earth, which then can affect like radio communications and even give us like auroras and stuff like that. So space weather is just really monitoring the surrounding conditions here on Earth, here around Earth, I should say, and pretty much all through space. So a lot of the data sets that the forecasters look at is like proton fluxes, electron fluxes. So that is the movement of those particles from the sun to the Earth. They also look at sun imagery, which identifies different parts of the sun's, getting a little ahead of myself here. It identifies different parts of the sun where there's different phenomena. So there could be like sunspots, there could be what I had just mentioned, coronal mass ejections, there could be flares. So it's a cool and niche industry to be in, but it's definitely one that, is uprising, especially within the field of meteorology.
Is that where we always get we get like the emergency scares that a flare happened and it's going to affect all of our communications and everything? Because you always hear about that, like one big flare will knock us all out.
Yeah, I mean, it could happen. Back in the 1800s, there was the Carrington event, and that knocked out like all the telecommunications here on Earth. So all the telegraph systems, they were knocked out. There were even some that were set ablaze. And so, an event like Carrington, I don't really know what's going to happen. I hope something like that doesn't happen, but thankfully we haven't had something to that degree today.
Yeah. Yeah. You say like, I hope that doesn't happen, right? But when I think of like with what you guys do, isn't that like the Super Bowl when things like that happen? Like, oh man, we got this big event coming, this massive hurricane. Like, we got to stay on watching this. I feel like that you don't want it to happen, but like that's when things get a little exciting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, yeah, like you said, I hope it doesn't happen, but if it does, it's going to be very interesting to see how folks kind of respond to that.
Yeah.
So.
You mentioned the Carrington event, so that's essentially like a worldwide EMP. Like that's just all communications would go down, everything would fry. There's no way to even study it. It's just, it would fry all electronics.
Well, not necessarily. So Carrington is actually the guy who identified this. And
Okay.
the impacts were all those communications going down. I actually don't know how long offhand, even though I just gave a presentation not too long ago to my company about this kind of stuff. But yeah. But Carrington is the guy who identified this event. He was able to identify like what had caused all those communications to go down.
Now, would it just shut down everything? Like, do we have anything to even protect against that, or is that the one thing that we're just like, if it happens, we're toast?
Yeah, I mean, it very well could shut down everything. Quite frankly, I don't know, like, to what degree things would be shut down. But yeah, hopefully that never happens. But who knows what is going to happen if something to that degree does happen.
We see the flare, all right? We got a telescope on the sun. We see the flare. How long before that thing reaches us? We're like, everyone get down.
So the flare itself actually doesn't hit Earth or come near Earth. So the flare, it'll eject all those protons and electrons, and that'll be sent our way. And that's the things that we have to worry about, because that could impact, our satellites, that could impact the astronauts, that could impact, all the radio communications, as I've been saying. So really, it's those electrons and protons that we want to be worried about, not so much the actual flare itself, since that physically can't reach us. And normally that takes a few days.
It's releasing then. That's what we would need to be worried about.
That is correct, yes.
Okay. So with what you do on a day-to-day operations then, right? I remember you telling me, like, I pull up my phone, right? And I go, all right, the weather today, I see the radar, it's coming in or whatever. But the way you were describing it is there are so many pieces of information that come in order to create a map to show you what is happening. And so I mean, you don't have to go too deep into it, because I remember you went pretty deep, but Just to give an idea of what it takes just to tell people what it's going to be like for weather that day. It'd be very interesting, I think.
Yeah, so I mean, you can kind of think of it as like a two-part process, So you got the satellite, and then that takes the observations. It takes a picture of the Earth. It takes measurements of the Earth, and then that gets sent down to Earth. So the first part of that is the observation, and then the actual data processing, and then it hits the forecaster's desk, and that's the second part. And in fact, that's the part that you see is what the forecaster is saying. A lot of applications these days also use direct model outputs. So all those observed data, they're going to be loaded inside of models. The models will generate, some kind of forecast, so to say. And then that'll get put out to the forecasters. And then it'll be up to the forecasters to disseminate that and determine, what the forecast is going to be for the day. So for those golfers out there, you're going to be listening to them. So you won't be listening to me. I only make sure that the data gets to the forecaster so the forecaster can tell you if you can go outside and golf today or not.
So when they're like, "Damn you, weatherman," they told me it was going to be sunny today and it's raining out. It's not really the weatherman's fault. It's really coming back to you. Did you provide the information correctly? I'm joking.
Darn, you caught me again.
The weatherman's just like, I'm following Proto from the god of weather here, and I'm not. But it's interesting that when that information is coming down from the satellite, right? Like it's not coming in. Obviously, what we could see as like a picture, right? You're looking at it from this like data is coming in, numbers and everything like that to determine where things are going to be. Is that right, or are you actually seeing like a map and picture of the direction of where things are going to go?
No, it's just the data. In fact, the system that I maintain, I actually don't physically see those numbers. I don't physically see those data sets. So let's see if I can describe the system that I maintain. So think of it as like, you have all these different data sets that need to generate other data sets, right? How do we go about making sure that the proper data sets get fed into something that transforms it into a data set that makes a lot more sense for the forecasters? So on a day-to-day, I don't look at the data sets. Although kind of in my free time, I do a little bit because I just like seeing what the heck is going on out there in space and here on Earth. But it's really the system that determines what files need to be generated based upon what we ingested is the system that I maintain on a day-to-day basis.
You're not reading it full detail because that's just a plethora. Probably you'd spend too many hours trying to read the whole thing. It's just quickly using the software to decipher what's happening and then get that over to the desk of the meteorologist.
Yeah, kind of, sort of. I mean, it comes in to our system as something that doesn't really make sense for forecasters. So, we have stuff in place for these data sets to go into to be able to be processed one step further to generate a data set that makes sense for the forecasters. And that data set gets shipped off to them. And then they do the interpretation, they do the analysis, and then they relay that to the general public and the broader public, I should say. So the stuff that you see on your app, that's them.
Got it. So it's like a hand down of information. We start here, we get here. And I don't mean this the wrong way, but it's like you get the information, you're like, all right, I got to dumb this down for the civilians. All right, here you go. Here's what this is going to look like, guys. All right, meteorologists, you've gone to college to be able to present this map that I've given you. Go do that.
Yeah, I mean, it really, at the end of the day, it's going to be the forecaster's job to understand what's going on and then, provide that forecast. And then, you got the broadcasters who also add in that additional layer of being able to communicate with the general public, right? If I were to sit here and say that there's a 500 millibar shortwave coming in, right, we're getting upward motion over this certain area, that doesn't make any sense to you. But if I say, hey, there's a risk of tornadoes today, that makes a little bit more sense for you, right?
Yeah, man, I don't know why this is reminding me, but it's almost like Apple being like, yeah, I could talk your ear off with how the software works and everything, but actually, if you just click that button, that'll take you right where you wanted to go. You don't need to
True
know
story.
how all the other stuff works. Yeah, and Colton, I'm just talking and asking questions if anything comes to your mind.
No, I mean, I'd love
Yeah,
how
no.
you're breaking it down there, Brandon, because a lot of these things kind of revert back to us just being frustrated. Like, you're talking to a guy that recently I learned a 36% chance of rain just meant 36% coverage, and that was mind blowing. So I'm curious, where do you see this career path taking you? I mean, Dylan kind of introduced it earlier as far as like, hey, it's really cool. We get a chance to see an inlet to what you're doing now. But where do you see yourself wanting to take things with this?
All cards are currently in the play. I don't know where I'm going to end up 5 years from now. If I continue working in the weather industry, then I will continue working in the weather industry, which is obviously ideal. But I definitely do want to continue working with software. I definitely want to continue being in the weather industry, but software is evolving so quickly. Who knows where I'm going to be? So don't really have an answer there, but other than
Do you see AI playing a role in your field at all?
In the field, absolutely. Unfortunately, well, I wouldn't say unfortunately, but the weather industry is actually starting to catch up and starting to integrate AI into a lot of the products. A lot they're here. So the weather industry is beginning to integrate AI. They're starting to really trying to figure out how they can leverage AI to make better models, for instance. One of the talks that I went to at the American Meteorological Society was about how they're using AI to build a better, higher resolution model. And I'll spare the technical details here because it was even over my head because I'm not an AI guy, admittedly. But I found it very interesting that folks are finally using AI for the weather industry, right? Because software and weather go hand in hand with one another.
Really? Like, how? Why? Can you dive a little bit deeper? Why they go hand in hand? I always thought the AI would be more of input of what we want it to be. Like it just learns, right? Like learn. But with weather, yeah, it can learn, but just the same way, it needs to be able to predict. So with where I'm going with this is like Tesla, right? The system, their cars with the AI, it learns to predict by millions and millions of hours of data that's being pumped into it. Mm-hmm. But with weather, I just feel like, yeah, we could pump tons of data into it, but it's so unpredictable. How could AI and weather be correlated, do you think?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Admittedly, I don't have an answer offhand for that, but probably my best guess would be deterministic forecast. Well, maybe, yeah, deterministic forecasting. So, the forecasters look at the model, and the model, it gives you a snapshot of what it thinks is going to happen at a particular time in the future. They can use AI to be able to fine tune and tweak some of the finer details, right? So probably a really good instance of this, or scenario, I should say, is that like we'll take tornadoes, for instance. I know that there are tools internally for the Weather Service and some of the other partners that are being developed to better forecast for tornadoes. And so one of them is using AI. Tornadoes, as it is, are very, very, very difficult to forecast for. So the way that the Storm Prediction Center forecasts for them is by issuing probability outlooks, saying that you have a 2% chance over this giant area of seeing a tornado within 25 miles of any given point in this area, right? That makes sense so far, right?
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of like with the hurricanes, with the strings, the spaghetti graphs. Is that kind of like the same idea?
Kind of, sort of. The spaghetti graphs are really intended to just kind of give you a general idea of where all the models are going with a specific hurricane track. So you can kind of think of it as like grouping together and seeing, where model consensus is. When we're talking about like tornado probabilities, hail probabilities, and wind probabilities, so I'm pointing to the Storm Prediction Center in this case, we're really looking at what is the chance of this specific severe weather event happening at any given point inside of a circle, right? It could be 2%, 5%, 10%, and so on and so forth. But AI can actually help, excellent. But yeah, basically models is the long story short of this.
So it's like the end product is what it's good for. So what you were talking about earlier, how you're collecting all the data and then you get it to the meteorologist to be able to present it. That's at the final stage is where you're seeing it be able to more use.
Yes. Yeah, you're not seeing it like I don't know, whatever. So I actually have this thing called ChatGTP pulled up right now, and what that is it is a text-based AI that you give it. You can hold a conversation with it, and it gives you like really good outputs. It's not like that where it does it in real time. It'll generate a forecast, right? Something that gives you something ahead of time, but it's static, so to say. So once it delivers it to you, it delivers it to you. You got to wait for the next cycle for more information.
Understood. Got it. Okay. That's interesting. So do you see that? Is it already being implemented, do you think, already in the day-to-day operations?
In operations, I don't think so, but we're getting relatively close with that, as far as I know. Now, I can't speak to it way too much because I'm not in that field, but I know that there's a lot of active research and development that's happening in that field.
I would think that would definitely be used more, maybe not even like your local news channel, but more on like the software that you're getting through your Apple or your Samsung. That's where I think it would be used for, that it's creating the info.
Exactly. Yeah. So that actually can be used to refine the stuff that you see in your app. Believe it or not, a lot of what you see inside apps is direct model output. Sometimes there's a human behind the forecast and giving you the forecast, but a lot of the times it's direct model output. And so, this is more so of a personal thing. I don't like using it. In fact, the default weather app that comes on the iPhone, I delete it right away because I don't like it. It's good for sunny days. It's good for days that are easy to forecast for. But let's say, you're up in Pennsylvania or whatever. You have a low pressure system that's coming across, and, with the low pressure system, you've got a warm front. So to the north of that warm front, you've got rain. To the south of that warm front, you've got snow. So in a scenario like that, especially if that low is traversing like right next to where you're at, where's that warm front placement? The app is going to tell you, what the model is spitting out. And we assume that models are wrong. And it's up to the forecaster to disseminate and determine what actually, might happen versus, a model. And so in a situation like that, the app may not necessarily be correct. They could say that the temperature is going to get up to 34 degrees and it's going to rain. But, the warm front actually pushed through, and then you're getting temperatures in, 28, 29 degrees, and you're getting, a lot of snow, for instance, right? So it's those really difficult forecasting scenarios that the app won't tell you exactly what'll happen. But on high pressure, sunny days, the app is great.
It's almost like the app is built for easy data to flow through it. Like, yeah, we could be right here. But like you're saying, in a world where so many different systems are coming together in one spot, the app is just not able to collectively. I mean, I guess kind of like you were saying earlier with the AI, like it's just not able to pull together the information you're looking for and give you an accurate, because there's so much data being flowed in.
And remember, at the end of the day, it's a computer output, right? Computers don't know their P's from Q's. Humans do. So, we're able to disseminate that information one step further and say, no, the model is complete BS here because of ABC, right?
So what's the most accurate, thing I should be looking at? If it's not my app, is it the Weather Channel? Is it Google Weather?
I would recommend the National Weather Service, the government agency. They have forecasters 24/7, always monitoring, and there's always a human who's quality controlling that data and is making sure that they put the best forecasts out there. Now, it's not as personalized and not as detailed as, say, the app on your phone. They look at it from a very broader perspective since they have a very large area to forecast for. But I would definitely check out the National Weather Service. And there's 124 different offices stationed all around the United States. So the one here in Tampa is Weather Service in Tampa. So their office is located in Ruskin. So I just go to their webpage and I see what the forecast is. They do a really good job of being able to convey that information.
Okay, that's good. Is the Weather Channel something completely different from the government?
Yeah, the Weather Channel is it's
is the
private
Weather Channel
company.
relying on the? Oh, okay.
I'm sorry?
I definitely would. I would have thought that Weather Channel was like, hey, we're collecting the best data to give it out to you, but they're a private company collecting their own data.
Well, I mean, I'm not discrediting by any.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah,
I just thought they were connected. That's all.
And a lot of the private companies that are out there, like Weather Channel, AccuWeather, Weather Nation, they do a really good job of being able to disseminate things at a very high level and really try and personalize it to be yours. With the Weather Service, they're one step back, so to say. And it's hard for them to get personal with, you as the end consumer. Yeah. So there's that additional layer right there.
Nothing will ever be better than the old school smooth jazz on the Weather Channel giving you your forecasts. I don't know.
Or the dude that would go to the hurricanes and be
man.
like flying sideways when they first came in. What was his name?
Yeah, I forgot his name. Dang it.
Oh. It's not Josh Morgamon. It's
if he shows up, you're
Ron
in
Artest?
trouble, though.
Yeah, Jim Cantori.
Jim Cantori. There it is.
What's his? Yeah.
When that dude backs away, you need to get out of town.
Evacuating. That guy only shows up for bad stuff. He's got a easy but not easy job. Like if it's not a bad year of hurricanes or anything like that, he's like, oh, I got paid this year, didn't do nothing. So speaking of that, though, him going into the eyes of the storm, right? Brandon, I'd love to hear you talk about kind of, I don't know if it's a hobby or if it's a side thing you do, but, I mean, you love chasing tornadoes. Like, that's like a thing that you love to do and collect the data on them, getting in front of them. I remember you sent me a picture of, I don't know, one of the biggest tornadoes, and you're just standing directly in front of it with a big old smile on your face. That was the coolest picture I think I've ever seen. Love to hear you just how you got into this and where it's led to.
Yeah, I mean, I've always had a fascination for tornadoes. I've always thought that they were just cool as heck. And so, I had an opportunity land in my lap back in 2016 to go storm chasing with a crew called the Severe Center for Severe Weather Research. There we go. Mm-hmm. And so what we were doing is we were studying the low-level winds of tornadoes. So the problem is that the Doppler radars, the things that are used to scan the sky to make sure to see where all the clouds are at and stuff like that, they're stationary, right? You can't really pick one of those things up, put it on the back of a truck, and go, right? They're heavy. They weigh a ton. So what they did, the Center for Severe Weather Research, is they created these things called Doppler on wheels. So it's a Doppler radar that's stuck on the back of a semi-truck. And, well, half of a semi-truck, I should say. And they go chasing with it. They also have these scout vehicles that have instruments 13 feet off the ground, right in front of the vehicle. And then in the back of these Dodge pickup trucks, they have pods that, if you've ever watched Twister, looks very similar to Dorothy and all those other instruments. Except we didn't have the little fancy things that flew up into the tornado. There was an anemometer on it. With an anemometer measures wind. Yeah. There was a barometer on it, so it was measuring pressure. And it was just this yellow thing of steel with weather instruments on it. I think it weighed like about 100 pounds or so. And the whole idea was for us to get those Doppler radars close to the tornado so that it can study the tornado. The thing with the stationary radars is that the the beam is actually angled at like 0.5 degrees, if I'm not mistaken. So if you go out, say, 5-6 miles, that beam is actually well into the clouds, and it's not looking at the tornado. So that's the whole point of the project. Study the low-level winds of tornadoes by getting very close and up close and personal to them. And so I chased with someone named Tim Marshall. And if you Google who he is, there's tons and tons of results for this guy. Very well-known storm chaser. He's a civil engineer, and I think he had just retired recently. And I think he's traveling the world. I'm very jealous of him. And meanwhile, I'm over here working. And the guy is very, very knowledgeable about tornadoes and storm chasing. And a lot of what he did for his day-to-day is actually go out with the Weather Service and do storm surveys. So I had the opportunity to be able to chase with him. And so with that, one of the big chase days we had was the Sulphur, Oklahoma tornado back in 2016 on May 9. We were hesitant on chasing that day. And I think a few of us had convinced the project leaders to go out and chase. And so there was a tornado that touched down that was an EF4 initially, and we had deployed pods like we had practiced well beforehand. We actually went out into an open field and acted like we were chasing and trying to orient the pod and taking all these different measurements, while we're out there. We looked pretty silly doing it, but, come go time, we knew what to do. Well, come go time, that was not what we were supposed to do, because if you have pea-sized hail whipping at you at 80 miles an hour, you don't really want to be standing out there with a piece of paper on a clipboard writing down observations and making sure the pod is oriented correctly, right? So, yeah. Needless to say, that didn't work, but there was an EF4 tornado that touched down. We deployed the pods. Everybody deployed their pods except us. We kept one. And the tornado was supposed to hit them, but it didn't. It actually continued moving parallel to them, and then it moved north. So we were really upset, but we still had one pod. So we're like, we're going to go after this thing. So, we drive around, we get in front of it, and then it lifts. And we're like, crap, we missed our chance. So now we wait around for a little bit. We're just kind of watching the mesocyclone. And then next thing you know, it just drops this gigantic 1.8 mile wide tornado. And when I say this thing was scary,
like right where you were, just dropped it down?
No, like we were still in front of the mesocyclone at this point, and we were looking behind us, and it just formed this giant tornado. And then that's when we're like, oh shit, we better get out of the way of this. But we decided to stay in the way and deploy a pod. And I remember pulling up in front of the tornado. It's bearing down on us. I remember dropping the pod, and I remember looking around, and I'm like, this place is not going to be here when we come back for our pod. And we all get back into the car, and Tim Marshall's standing outside, okay, casually just taking photos of this giant cloud from horizon to horizon. And it's just one rotating cloud, horizon to horizon. He's out there taking photos. I'm in the car, but the driver, Jake the Flitch, who works for the Weather Service in Seattle, he's in the car. He's freaking out. I'm freaking out. We're like, we got to get out of here. We got to get out of here. We got to get out of here. And then finally, Tim jumps in the car. He looks at Jake, and he's like, drive. And Jake steps on the pedal, and we haul ass out of there. And I remember that, we haul ass out of there. And I remember turning a corner and then looking back, and I just see the tornado pass right behind us. And as it's passing, we have power lines that are coming down. We're trying to navigate through all this, and yeah, it was very intense. It's very scary, I will say, but it was an adrenaline rush.
Oh, I bet. You said E4 was the level of it. Like, what?
Yeah, that was the first one. That was the one that we missed.
That was the one you missed.
Yeah, it picked up and it dropped another one, and that one was an EF3.
What, and what's describe the tiers? How high do we go? How low do you go? Like how?
Yeah, so EF0 is the smallest one. Typically, those are your very quick. Blow some leaves around. Well, not blow some leaves around, but that's the analogy that I kind of use. Is it's very weak, doesn't do a lot of structural damage. Nothing like significant, so to say. And then there's EF1, which is one step above that. EF2, EF3, 4, and 5. So EF5 is generally reserved for really catastrophic events. Houses are ripped out of their foundations. Everything is just flattened, right? I don't know much about the EF scale, admittedly, even though I'm really into tornadoes. I do have a lot of people who know a lot more, especially when it comes to damage indicators. So that is how they measure the measure and rate the tornado. But EF5s are reserved for the worst of the worst, so to say. And then below that, EF4. So on.
Well, that just gives everyone an idea of how powerful that sucker was then, because that's like hurricane category 4 coming at you. You're like, we should probably get out of here for that one.
Yeah, I remember watching it go by, and I was filming it on my dinky little iPhone at the time, because I didn't bring my camera for some reason, because I'm like, oh, we're doing research. I'm probably not going to need my camera. My focus is research, and that was a mistake.
My focus is running away from this thing. Taking pictures of it. Get the hell out of here. So
exactly.
are you having to You say this thing's 100 pounds, but I mean, I've seen tornadoes, like you said, rip houses out. Are you
I was thinking the same thing.
Or are you drilling this thing into the ground? Like, how is this thing staying there to collect the data?
Yeah, it's literally just sitting on the ground, just chilling. It just sits there. It vibes. It's just
really?
I'm gonna collect data. Mm-hmm.
How it just sits there? How is it able to sit there with this powerful storm coming through at 100. I guess it is. Is it not
They're,
able
like,
to pick up
staked
100
into
pounds?
the ground
I would
or
assume
something?
so, but I guess maybe not.
Oh, I would assume so. Yeah, so when we actually went back to collect it, it was wedged into the ground. The rocks from the gravel from the road was on the pod. In fact, it was over half the pod. One of the faces of the yellow paint was completely ripped apart, and we're assuming that that's because the tornado picked up the rocks and it was just chucking it at it. Also, didn't help that there was pea-sized hail going about 80 miles per hour. That hurt for the record. Don't ever do that. Professional advice. So,
Man, and so it just downward pressure maybe just drove it down.
yeah, we're thinking that it was just that downward pressure. There was some downward component that was forcing it to move in one direction and also be dug into the ground.
Now, what are the odds that you were able to get that to happen? Like, you Storm Chasers, there was a show, I don't know, I guess on Discovery Channel for a little while where they had that big car. Seemed like only a third of the episodes, maybe less, they actually were able to get any real data collected. So, like
get in
what are the odds you
position
were able to get that info? Yeah. 'Cause Twister, the whole movie is about it. It's 2 hours at least of us watching until they're finally able to get in front of it.
Yeah, I mean, I will say it is very hard to get hit by a tornado. We never got hit, thankfully. We didn't want to get hit, but we wanted the pod to get hit. So, there was that level of risk there. But it is very hard to get in front of a tornado and to get hit. And I always tell people, whenever you go out and storm chase, the tornado is actually not the biggest threat. It's the storm chasers, the other storm chasers, that are the biggest threat.
Really? Can you describe that? Like, are getting in the way, or like what's?
Yeah. I mean, it's other people driving. You got so many people on the road, so many people who don't really know what they're doing. You got people being distracted, right? Drivers are trying to look at the tornado. They're trying to figure out where to go. If you're a solo chaser, right, you have to navigate. You have to drive. You also want to be sure that you're collecting video, and so on and so forth. So it's really just this culmination of inexperienced people mixed with experienced people, distracted drivers, and of the sorts.
For whatever reason, my mind was like, yeah, you're the only people out there trying to collect this. I never would have thought there's like other crazy people out there.
Oh yeah,
like,
no,
let's get into this thing.
There's an entire community dedicated to this. Of professionals and amateurs. People who want to learn more about storm chasing, how they can get into it. People chase for different reasons. For me, I find the whole thrill in chasing is actually relating back to the forecasting aspect. Mm-hmm. So, there's that challenge of, well, I'm not going to look at external sources and see what they say. I'm going to make my own forecast and I'm going to go chase, because chasing it's expensive, right? There's that component of financial investment, right? So if you make a forecast and you commit to a certain location as like your target area, so to say, you're investing that money, you're investing that time, right? Especially if you're trying to collect footage and try to make a little bit of money off of it, then, that adds another layer of complexity, a little bit more layer of pressure as well. So
are there, and I'm assuming where you're going to get these storms, right? It's probably got to be in the middle of nowhere. I assume, like, there's not a lot of people probably living there because they know what there could be, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, it's a mixture of both. I mean, I've been inside of cities chasing tornadoes. I've been out in the middle of bumblefick nowhere. I've been in a dirt road stuck. Little story with that, by the way. Trying to chase a tornado. It's everywhere. I mean, cities are not immune to tornadoes by any means whatsoever. Same thing with mountainous areas. A lot of people think that tornadoes don't happen in mountains because of mountains. Well, that's not true, actually. That tornadoes will still happen, but they may not happen to the same degree or to the same scale as to what you see out in like Oklahoma or Texas or Nebraska.
Mm-hmm. What's the story on getting stuck on a dirt road? All
right, so we had Weather Nation follow us, and for those who are not aware of who Weather Nation is, they are a TV weather provider. They go through DirecTV, and they followed us on our journey during the Dodge City event. So Dodge City was the 26th of May of 2016, if I have my dates correct. Or no, I'm sorry, it was the 24th of May. Anywho, so we pull into context. There's two tornadoes that we're currently looking at from the same mesocyclone, and we're trying to chase it. We're trying to put pods in front of it, just like we did beforehand. If we did it once, we can do it again. At least we thought we could. And we turned down this road that was slightly skeptical. We weren't sure if it was safe to go down because it was mud. Well, it was dirt. Turns out that there was a small rainstorm before in that area, and that dirt turned to mud. Well, what happens if you take a truck down mud? You're going to slip and slide. That's exactly what we did. We slipped and we slid, and we almost ended up in a ditch. And Weather Nation's following us. They're live in their vehicle. Okay, the driver is doing simultaneous reporting while following us. Someone looks at me in the vehicle and says, "Brandon, I need you to go tell Ben, who's the driver of Weather Nation, that we're stuck and we need help. And run, make it fast, because there's a tornado that's bearing down on us." And no joke, literally right in front of us, maybe, half mile or so, there's a tornado just staying stationary. The problem is if you see a stationary tornado, it means that it's probably coming for you, right? So here I am, a big dude. Jump out of the vehicle. The ground is straight mud. What happens when you try and run in mud? You know how, like, in those cartoons? Yeah, you know how in those cartoons they kind of speed up and then they go? Well, imagine me speeding up but not going. So here I am just going back and forth, just slowly going on live TV in front of like 15,000 people. No problem.
Is this the you were on TV scenario you were describing?
Yeah. Well, okay, that was one of them. I've actually had two.
Oh, okay. Earlier you were like, "Oh yeah, I was on one time. It wasn't that big of a deal. Just slip and slide it, I guess." Wow. And so this thing is barreling down on you. You got one guy reporting. You're trying to get and push. Like, what? How were you able to push it out, or did y'all just haul tail out of there?
No. We actually called the chase after that. We hoped that this tornado would not hit us. Thankfully, it did not. And what happened was it lifted, and then it cycled, and it dropped another tornado to the right of where we were, and then it just moved away. So we were very thankful that it didn't continue towards us. Otherwise, we would have been hit. But we actually had to get some trucks to be able to pull us out. And the same thing actually happened with the Doppler on wheels. Both trucks, they also got stuck in the same scenario we did. We were just on a different road about a half mile down. So, we had to get ourselves unstuck first using the Weather Nation car. And I think they just had like a Ford, sedan or whatever. So that trying to pull a Dodge pickup out of that is one heck of a sight to see. But we managed to do it somehow or another. And then so we had to go get the other scout vehicles unstuck from their mud. And we also had to get the Doppler on wheels, the big giant trucks, unstuck.
God dang. So, I mean, it just was extreme luck then that nothing happened. The tornado was like, "I'm not messing with the god of weather. Screw that." Someone else can have that problem. But man,
no, see, the thing is, I use my powers to tell it to like go away because we were stuck. So
now it's coming out. Thank you. I was hoping you would finally open up about it. I mean, just an idea. I'm just going to throw this out there as like, so you have these things that you're placing, right? You want to place it in front of it. What if you created some sort of football that you could throw into the storm? So you're just backing away.
Tom Brady is retiring.
Tom Brady, Peyton Manning, these things into the storm, and then it gets up into the storm and starts collecting the data. Hopefully it doesn't get flung out elsewhere, but I don't know.
Yeah, I mean that is, in theory a good idea. Well, somebody actually did attempt something very similar where they actually strapped a rocket launcher to the vehicle. And in fact, it was the guys on
Get out.
Discovery.
That's what I'm
who
talking
did that.
about.
Reed Timmer and his crew did that. And they tried to launch these little tiny rockets into the storm. I don't think they succeeded because that's hard to do. But still, they tried it. So, yeah.
That's crazy. Okay, rocket launcher I think is way better than throwing the football into it.
100%.
You get a little bit of a distance too, probably, right? Or
Exactly.
you go tank at it. Would you ever drive into a storm? Like if you were in that machine that supposedly protects you while you're in it, looked like it did. Would you drive into one, or are you staying clear?
Admittedly, I probably wouldn't. I know that it is, they really tried to hunker down in it, so to say, and ride it out. But, there's always that risk that something could go wrong. And, I wouldn't want to put myself in that kind of situation. So probably not. I'd rather stay back, hang back, vibe with the dudes and just take pictures, take photos, tweet about it, let the weather service know. And that's one thing also is some people chase to kind of help out with the weather service. Having field verification out there, boots on the ground, so to say, helps them out with, their warning process.
Are you quicker than a satellite then?
I'm sorry?
Are you quicker than a satellite in those scenarios? I'm just curious. Like, 'cause you're saying helping them out.
I mean, I'm not really sure what you're trying to say here.
Like,
The man's just genuinely curious, but the way he said it was jabbing. Are you quicker in a satellite?
I probably. Damn, did that sound like? I probably sounded like an asshole. I apologize. Like,
No. The way that
satellite's
I'm
coming over, and you're down here, and then the National Weather Service is trying to collect the information on this tornado. Are you able to relay back better or quicker information than what they're gathering?
Yeah. So I mean, decouple those. Those are two completely separate things. The Weather Service at an operational level does use the satellite data. They use radar. The boots on the ground helps them, but it's not deemed operational because you can't guarantee that there's going to be chasers there. And then you also have to figure out, is this really ground truth? Is this really what this person is seeing? Because there's a lot of fake tornadoes, fake images that circulate on the internet, and the Weather Service offices get tagged and so on and so forth. So
Really? There's people creating fake weather info?
It's bad. Yeah.
Is it because they can sell that information to like a weather channel to get?
There's something. There was some research done a while ago about like all the likes and tweets that you get. There's that stimulating factor in your brain that when you see like 10,000 people like your tweet, you feel good about yourself, and I think that's what a lot of people are trying to go for. Whenever they circulate these false images. And say that, this legitimately happened. There was a really famous one with Hurricane Harvey that was going around that is a picture of a shark that looks like it's next to a highway underwater. It's not true at all. Many people have determined that that's a fake image, but it still gets circulated. Even to this day, it still gets circulated. Like when Ian hit Florida, that image was circulated.
I think I've seen that image before. It's almost like when you see the seals going down the highway after a hurricane or something. I'm like, I don't think that's from Florida, but that's somewhere else out there.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I know we're coming up on the hour here, Brandon. Colton, if you want to ask, or do you want me to ask the favorite question?
Oh man, I want to give you a chance here. Take a good old honest stab at it, Dylan.
Oh, I'll give it a good old stab at it. So we like to ask this to all of our guests. If there was one question that you wish more people asked you, to learn more about you, what would that be?
Wow, that's a good question.
Colton would say so. Came up with it.
Oh, definitely. No.
Is this a good time for my internet to disconnect? It gives me some time to think. No,
Is it go? It'll be like edit it back in 2 days later.
Honestly, I don't know. I've never given thought to that. If I had a gun to my head and I had to give an answer, I guess it would be, what ways could we get,
Perfect.
the one question I think that, I would like to be asked more often is, where can I get, the proper the proper alerts of, all these catastrophic events like hurricanes, tornadoes and stuff like that. What can I do to better prepare myself for these kinds of situations? And the answer to that really is, look at official sources. There's a lot of misinformation out there on the internet. So, be looking at the weather service, be looking at the local emergency management folks, the police force, the FEMA is another really good one, right? Make sure that you're prepared for these kinds of situations in case they ever come and hit your home. A lot of people have that mindset of, well, I've been underneath, thousands of warnings my entire life. A tornado has never hit my home. Well, that's not necessarily true because, just because you're underneath that tornado warning 1,000 times, it doesn't mean another 1,000 times that tornado is not going to hit, right? Yeah. So there's always that chance that if you get thrown into a polygon, you get thrown into a watch, into a warning, right? That something could happen to you or could happen to your home. And, as meteorologists, we don't want to do that. So we try and communicate to the public and say, hey, we've got this wind event that's coming that's going to bring 70-mile-per-hour winds. Make sure you guys are prepared for this, right?
Yeah, I always look at it as when you get those warnings that something's in your area, it just means your odds are up. Like, hey, you didn't think it would happen in the last storm because there wasn't a warning, but now your odds are up. Something might happen. I definitely see that. Well, Brandon, thanks for coming on today, man. It was definitely an interesting conversation. Thanks for sharing all this knowledge that you have. I know I've a lot of people will find this interesting for sure because we don't run into too many people that get to listen to people that are an expert in this area or get to chase tornadoes. I don't know. I've only seen that on Discovery Channel. So thanks for coming on, Brandon. Stay on here afterwards.
They're woo, but they're real.